to me, look, the gods want us to be like this.
Now, this story that you're telling, Credo, from the African perspective, is it in effect the same story as told in the tens of thousands of clay tablets found in what we now call Iraq, become known as the Sumerian tablets, that talk about a race of gods called the Anunnaki, who came in and brought knowledge, ruled the people, and interbred with them?
Yes.
Do you say, therefore, that the Anunnaki in those stories that have increasingly, of course, been translated in a number of books, yes, they were reptilian, you say?
Say, all I do know is this, that here in South Africa, amongst the Xhosa people, amongst the Zulu people, there are beings who are very revered even now, and they are called Amanuna or Amanono. Amanono is Zulu, Amanuna is Xhosa. Now these beings are godlike beings, we are told. They can change their faces. They can change their appearance.
They can shapeshift.
Yes, sir. They are shape shifters. A manuna, now if a Xhosa man has married a very beautiful wife, a wife whose face seems to change every day, he teases that wife by calling her his inuna, linuna lam. In other words, a shape shifter. Say, it is said that the people who are closest to the hearts of the Manuna gods are women. And why? Because the women give to the Manuna the power of, they worship the Manuna, they hero worship them, which explains why Nefertiti wanted herself to look like one of them, and her children too. She was actually hero worshipping these creatures. And the how you say, women say, are copycats. And I'm not being sexist when I say this. Women will copycat any being that they think is supreme.
In Egypt also, you have the python-like headdresses, which are pretty obvious when you look at them, that the pharaohs were connected with.
Yes, sir. And the reptile has played an unusually strange part in the culture of all African tribes. For example, it is my suspicion, sir, that we black people of Southern Africa are going to be deprived of our nationhood in the very near future, and that we are going to be ruled by people of Uganda. But wait, what is the real meaning of the word Baganda? Baganda. And what is the creature that you see depicted on the walls of houses and on the roofs of houses of some of the greatest empires in Africa? It is the python. There was a golden python which was used as a decoration on the roof of the house in which the king of Benin, the Oba, lived. Zulu people revere the mamba, a very terrible snake. Zulu people revere other snakes as well. And in Venda, in the northern Transvaal, the Venda people regard the snake as well as the crocodile as sacred. And they, even today, their girls dance at initiation, a long, rather sinuous dance representing the movements of a python. And they call that dance the Domba dance. And Domba is the ancient name for a female python.
Well, wherever you look, all over the world, whether it's the Maya of Central America, you look at South America, Africa, anywhere, the symbolism of the snake, the crocodile, the representation of the reptilian is there. You go into Europe, and the Illuminati created cathedrals like Notre Dame in Paris. You've got the stately homes of the aristocracy, etc., with the gargoyles, the reptilian figures. It's been in our face, but we just somehow have had a blind spot to see it.
We human beings have idolized the reptile since the very supposed birth of our history. Go even further, much further. What was the creature which was honored by the ancient Greeks in their Delphic oracle? The python. What is the creature that stands next to the figures of the goddess Athena? The python. No matter where you look, go to China, where I once went. Who are the principal characters who brought wisdom to humankind? Creatures, part snake and part human being, one of whom I remember correctly was called Nu, a word which occurs also in Africa, and her brother was Kwa, and sometimes it's turned into one creature, Nukwa, she. Everywhere, we human beings have sacrificed our dignity as a species and attributed great intellect and great glory to reptiles, tortoises, turtles, lizards, snakes. Why? And even now, our fascination with the reptile and the amphibian has not stopped. In fact, it's growing. The popularity of all those dinosaurs in cartoon as well as in serious form, it makes me uneasy.
If we could just pick up this line of bloodlines, which the Sumerian tablets talk about, which you talk about, the interbreeding of humanity, and how the accounts explain that these crossbreeds were put into the positions of royal ruling power, almost as like demigods, middlemen between the gods, the Chittahuli, the reptiles, and the people. Those bloodlines, in my own research, became the European royal families and aristocracy, and today are the ruling, banking, business, and political and royal lines of the world. And the genealogy supports this increasingly. Is there a tradition also that the royal lines of Africa go back to the same source?
Please, you don't have to believe me. Go to Rwanda and there talk to the people there. They will tell you that the founding ancestors of their dynasties, the first kings who came from the sky, and they were called Imanugela, the ascending ones. Say, many African tribes believe that when the gods came down from the sky, they found human beings very, very stupid. And the human beings could not come before the gods in order to be taught. So what the gods did, and this is a story that you also find amongst the Dogoni people in West Africa, because the human beings were afraid of approaching these reptile gods. The reptile gods cold-bloodedly slaughtered one of their number and shed out its flesh with a specially gathered crowd of human beings. And these human beings then became the ancestors of our first great kings. Now say, African kings jealously guarded their blood.
If the royal lines of Africa claim descendants from the same source, basically, have those lines interbred as obsessively as the European aristocracy and royal family, and not bred outside of those lines?
Yes, sir. Royalty had to marry royalty. That was one of the strictest laws in ancient times.
Which is obviously where we get the term the divine right of kings from. It's not actually God, it's actually the gods.
Yes, sir, yes, yes. Royalty intermarried with royalty. You were not allowed to take a commoner as your senior wife if you were a king. You could take commoners after your senior wife.
Once the genetics has been achieved.
Yes, sir. Now, another thing, it is like the Sangomas. Very, very strictly speaking, a Sangoma who was sometimes viewed as a king or a queen was not allowed to marry outside her caste or his caste. Sangoma had to marry Sangoma, otherwise the non-Sangoma blood would pollute the god blood inside the Sangoma.
The lady that I've quoted in my books, Cathy O'Brien, who wrote her own book, Transformation of America, about being a mind-controlled slave of the American elite, she talks in there about seeing George Bush as president and vice president shapeshift into a reptile. And so many other people have told me this story of world leaders today changing into reptiles in front of their eyes and then changing back again. And Miguel de la Madrid, the president of Mexico at the time of George Bush, said to Cathy O'Brien, as she quotes in her book, that a reptilian extraterrestrial race interbred with the ancient Central American people because they needed to create bloodlines through which they could operate.
Yes.
And he said that these bloodlines were, in effect, today's world leaders. Does it fit with your knowledge, Credo, that the royal lines of the Chitahuli reptilian human interbreeding that become the demigods and the royal families, etc., that they have gone on in Africa, as well as the rest of the world, to become the ruling lines and the ruling people of these countries?
Yes, many of them have. In fact, some of Africa's most terrible warmongers, men who have drenched large areas of Africa in unnecessary blood and suffering, are directly descended from some of our greatest emperors of 600, 500, or even 1,000 years ago.
Just as the American presidents are.
Say, I would like to tell you about a man called Jonas Savimbi. Jonas Savimbi is a descendant of some of the greatest Angola kings In fact, the entire land called Angola was a breeding place of kingship in Africa. The word Ngola means a king, and Angola means land of many kings.
I must say, the way that the evidence that I'm uncovering is going, and it's going there very fast, and it syncs so much with what you're saying, is that a race from the stars, a reptilian race, interbred with humanity, they created crossbreed bloodlines, which became the middlemen, the demigods, the royal kings and lines and ruling power in the ancient world. And through interbreeding has become the presidents, the ruling people at the top of the power structures of banking, of politics, of the military, of all areas of our lives, of business, all of it. Is that the way that you have seen it yourself?
Yes, sir. You know, Mr. Ike, I wish for one moment I could contradict you. But for the last 40 years, I have observed an extremely disconcerting phenomenon in South Africa and in other parts of Africa as well. And this is the phenomenon. You find a rising black leader, a real leader amongst men, a ferocious activist for the rights of his people. This man starts something, whether it's a revolution or whatever, he starts it. And you look at his ancestry, because in Africa we look very closely at a man's ancestry. And you find that this man is nothing. Although he is doing such great deeds, he is actually a descendant of very peasant people. Ow. And you are worried. And all of a sudden, this black man will come to a sudden violent end, and a person who is totally new will take his place. And when you look at the ancestors of these people, this man, you find that he, or even she, is a person of very, very ancient African royalty. Now, let me show you. There was this war in Rhodesia, and many people got killed there. And there was a very fierce and dedicated general. His name was Tongogara. And Tongogara fought in Rhodesia. And just when victory was won, Tongogara was killed in a terrific explosion. Somebody put a bomb thing in his car and killed him very badly. But wait, Tongogara had been a descendant of a blacksmith. His surname, Tongo Gara, means powerful hammer. Now, who replaced Tongogara? A man called Robert Mugabe. Now, you can't get more royal than that. Mugabe is descended from ancient Mashona kings, and what is more, he knows it. Always a leader is removed, and when the power really comes, a new leader descended from some faraway monarch or tribal chieftain 2 centuries or 3 centuries ago comes on the scene. Again and again, there seems to be this particular force which elevates its descendants over ordinary human beings. I can give you hundreds of cases of this. Now, say, talk about a tradition of shape shifting. African kings, even now, and even ordinary tribal chieftains, especially in times of crisis, often spread the story through the land that they are able to change shape at will. There was a time when the South African government created the various Bantu homelands, and these homelands were ruled by those tribal chiefs who were agreeable to the apartheid system. Now, some of these chiefs were very unpopular with the people on the ground. And so, to build a charisma around themselves, these chiefs used to tell people that they are capable of changing shape at will. It was spoken about a certain African chief in the Transkei who became one of the first rulers of one of several black homelands there, that one day his enemies were looking for him to assassinate him, and when they broke into his house, they found a huge lion sitting on the floor, and this lion growled at them. And because of that story, because even today word of mouth is a very powerful media of communication in black communities, all enemies of that particular chief left him well alone because they feared his shape-changing powers. There.
Final question on this particular video, Credo,
Yes,
because we've got a lot more to say on others. Why is it that if the Chitahuli are all around us, which I certainly feel they are, and they're operating for certain bloodlines, now some people see them shapeshift. That's absolutely without doubt. I mean, so many people I've met all over the world have seen it. Into reptiles and then back again, the George Bushes, the Henry Kissingers, these key people. Why don't most people see it?
First of all, sir, I have said to you, Mr. Ike, that we human beings have got a blind spot in our brains. And this is what the Chitahuli and other alien nasty boys are exploiting. Look, sir, if we are a crowd and we are standing on a city street, we will see a man suddenly grow an extra arm. And many of us will see that, but will refuse to accept what they have seen. I have seen, sir, people going through severe trauma in train accidents, in car accidents, but they refuse to accept what they went through. I have seen women who have been raped several times, ferociously refusing to admit what they underwent. I've seen it many times. And these alien creatures know our weakness. They know that very often we human beings tend to censor what we see. If you are an educated professor and you see a spook, your educated mind will refuse to accept what it has seen. You will reject it and throw it to the back burner of your brain, and it will stay there. Hundreds of us see very strange things every day, but we refuse to accept what we see. Say, one of the things that a trainee Sangoma has got to learn. It is the ability to see. If I am standing here and looking at that bush over there, and I see something odd there, I must know what I've seen. But wait, sir, there is something else, something very, 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 very important, which I and many other thinkers in Africa have found. Mr. Ike, whenever you talk about such things, people call you paranoid. Mm-hmm. But no, you are really more sane than they really are. Say, there are certain vaccination things that are done to our children which rob them of the ability of seeing spiritual entities. Believe me, I can prove this. In Zululand, we were sometimes called before our chiefs, our inkos, and we were told that there is a great smallpox coming to the land and that all children must be vaccinated. Do you know that my mother's father, my grandfather, used to dodge that? He said that the white man's mjovo, the white man's vaccination, makes you blind. And if you are to look after my cattle, you must not go to the trading store to get your vaccination. But wait, the school inspectors used to come into the land and check each child for signs of vaccination or lack of it. Now, do you know what we used to do, Mr. David Icke? Our grandmothers used to give us great pain in order to save our spiritual eyes. They used to heat grains of maize, and then they would heat this grain of maize, and using a piece of wood as tweezers, place it firmly against the skin of the child. So when the school inspector came, he saw these blisters and assumed that the child had been vaccinated, but in fact it had not. And this was done to us many, many times. And I noticed that school children in mission schools who had been vaccinated for smallpox or for measles could not see spiritual entities at all. A ndondo, that is a flying saucer, a spuputeg, would fly through the sky at great speed and be seen by many men and women. But the child who had been vaccinated would see nothing. And I noticed this hundreds of times.
Well, what you've just said about vaccines and their effect and shutting us down spiritually and multidimensionally is fantastic, given that no matter what your background, creed, culture, parents on every inch of the planet almost are being pressurized to have their children vaccinated more and more and more. And to summarize what you've been saying, and indeed it's so much in line with what I've come to the conclusion about as well, an extraterrestrial race, reptilian race, disconnected us from our true magnificent senses in the long, long ancient world. They've been manipulating us ever since, and the more that time has passed, the less we've realized this is going on. And now we're at a point where we are in a prison without bars, a massive prison, and we don't even know we're in prison. We don't even know the jailers are. Indeed, when the jailers are exposed, people just laugh and ridicule and all that stuff. So we're in an unbelievable situation. And we're in a jail we deny we're in. And there are jailers we deny exist, and we call it freedom.
Yes, sir. Yes. You know, Mr. David, one of the reasons why I've joined forces with you is because I have serious reason to believe, and I will repeat these words until somebody shuts my mouth in death. I have serious reason to believe that on this planet, things are coming to a head, and our invisible jailers are going to fight tooth and nail to prevent this. Say, our people say that the blackest night often heralds the brightest dawn. The human being, captive as he is, slave as it is trying to fight back, sir. And this is where the crunch is going to come. I believe that we are not far away from the bloodiest crunch in the world. And I will tell you, my visions tell me that we are going to be struck with the most terrible sword of all, the sword of money, sir. Something is going to be done to money which will bring us all to the level of beggars. And do you know why, sir? Let me tell you. I used to work for big game hunters in Kenya. And one of them was an Italian gentleman. This Italian gentleman was such a powerful hunter, a white hunter. He used to shoot 2 bull elephants a day in Kenya, and he used to celebrate the shooting with a huge bottle. He called it a magnum of wine. I remember him pouring some of the wine onto the heads of the dead elephants. And then one day we went with this man to the land now called Rwanda, which used to be called Rwanda-Urundi. We went up the mountain, and there, accompanied by pygmies, he shot a gorilla, a huge ngangi with silver fur all along its back. And the great beast died so bravely that this Italian hunter started weeping like a woman. He fired us, told us that the job is finished, and he never hunted again. Sir, what I'm trying to tell you is this, that something inside us human beings is beginning to fight back against the Chitauri. Something inside us human beings is beginning to say no. And the Chitauri are going to drag us all right into hell itself in order to restore their power over us. Let me show you. Who would have thought in the 1950s, during the time of the Cold War, when everybody was expecting a bloody Third World War between Stalinist Russia and the Western nations, when British, American, and even Russian nuclear bombs were exploding all over the place, who would have thought that a few decades after that, there would come a time when a group of young men and women, the people of Greenpeace, would sail their ship, the Greenpeace Warrior, into a nuclear zone to prevent the French from testing one more atomic bomb. This tells us that something inside the human soul is fighting back. 40 years ago, it was once a very glamorous thing to kill animals. Today, A big game hunter like my Italian friend would never dare show himself in some hotels. He would be spat at and he would be beaten up by people because the hero of yesterday, the Bwana Banduki, the gun Bwana of 40 years ago, is today a murderer. Now, things are coming to a crunch. 40 years ago, nobody cared a damn about the environment. People did not even know that there existed such a thing as an environment or a food chain. Today, there are people who would rather lose their lives than not save a buck which is drowning in a river. A God is being born inside us, all of us. But herein lies the danger. We must be aware of the Chitauri. They are real entities. They leave scars on human bodies. They kill people. They are murdering South Africa even as we are talking now. Every word you and I are speaking now is spoken too late, Mr. David Icke. AIDS is rampaging through our communities. And I have found a new disease in Botswana, which nobody is talking about even. It is 20 times more vicious than AIDS. It is called Ebola. Oh my God. And we must please be aware. Let nobody laugh when we talk about conspiracy theories. But there is one thing, sir, that I beg that you and others like you should discard una momento, as they say in South America. Stop calling the conspiracy a theory, sir. Theories do not kill people, Mr. David Icke. Theories do not murder innocent children. Theories do not put multiple murderers of Kabila's stripe into power in countries.
Absolutely.
Theories are just ideas floating in the air. The conspiracy is real. It is there and it kills.
The staggeringly intelligent, the staggeringly wise, and the staggeringly knowledgeable Credo Mutwa. And his knowledge the world needs to know. Not only is Credo a man who has gathered this enormous knowledge together, he's a man with the courage and the foresight and the wisdom to know that the world needs to hear this, even though most of the world, particularly those who run the world, don't want anyone to hear this. But if we're going to be free, and we are, then we need to know all there is to know, and not just that which the few want us to think is the world, when a very different world is unfolding all around us every day. In the next video, we're going to be taking the story on with Credo and showing how these reptilian bloodlines and this Chitahuli, this reptilian group, expanded their power across the world, took over Africa and other great continents, and today are the ruling elite that controls planet Earth. And by knowing that, and by knowing how it's done and how it works, we can take control and power back into our lives from those who have controlled us and this planet for thousands of years. It's a great time to be alive. From Africa for now. Thank you, and thanks for listening to A Remarkable Man.